Hmm? You need to delete that. It needs to be deleted, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. Someone's commented really.
Saying what?
Comment what?
Comment to win.
How do I delete?
Comment to win. Oh yeah. Should have said ask a comment.
Trying to delete it.
We're live now.
Why do you keep making us live but I'm just sitting here vaping?
I said we're going live. You said we're alright.
Sorry
Stop
everyone,
vaping.
don't vape. Vaping's bad. So we're live now.
Yeah, right now.
Okay, so we are going to be doing these live streams as regularly as possible. Hopefully every week. Depends on where I am, what I'm doing and what the availability is like. But the idea behind these live streams is to talk to you lot. I'm sure you're all aware with this concept, you know, it's very popular around the world. But we want to use this as an opportunity to talk to you, show you some of the things that we get up to, run through our films, we'll have highlights and we'll pick subjects from the films to talk about. So the first one we're going to look at is it's actually a trio of films from the Hunter series with Jim Shelley. Now there'll be many of you that are Cypography members and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but there'll also be a lot of you that aren't. You know, this is on YouTube and you may not have access to our films. So the Hunter series, for those of you that don't know, is an exclusive series with Jim Shelley and it has taken us far and wide. We've been all across the UK, we've been into France, Belgium, Holland, you name it, we've been there. And as time moves on, we will go to more and more places. But a recent session, and probably one of the most exciting trips I've ever been on, whether that's been with my rods or as a cameraman, this was a bit of both. So I was fishing and I was filming. And when I first started doing the filming with Jim, it was always him fishing and I wasn't. But as time has moved on, as we've, you know, sort of learned to live with each other on the bank, make these films, we made a decision that if it suited it, I would fish as well. And that's what we did for this particular trip. So it was planned over quite a long period of time. Sometimes we do stuff spur of the moment, but this was a trip that we'd sort of had the whole winter to think about. We wanted to go somewhere outside of the UK, but we wanted to really step it up and go somewhere that was going to be totally different to anything that we'd really done before. A proper challenge with the opportunity to make a film that was very different to anything we'd made before. And there's certain ways you can do that. Once you sort of cross the border, you go into Europe. There's a lot of options, and we chose a huge public water. And what I mean by a public water is it's somewhere that you can fish with one fishing ticket. So in the UK, it works basically. You've got day tickets, you've got your syndicates, you've got your exclusive bookings. It's done a little bit differently abroad, and in France you're able to purchase a ticket that covers you for public waters. Now these venues are not your traditional holiday venues. You're not going to go there, you're not going to be fed and watered. A lot of the time you're not really going to know anything, and for some people that'll be the worst part of it, but for myself and lots of other people, that's the best bit about it. You know, you don't know what you're going to get. It's very much an adventure, and the lake we had chosen was the biggest lake that either of us had ever fished. It was public, so we could just turn up and fish, and that was about all we knew. We didn't really know the stock. We didn't really know how big the carp went. All we knew was it was a massive lake. It ticked all the boxes that we wanted in terms of the type of fishing that we were going to do, and we couldn't wait to go, you know, and it was literally that. Once we decided where we were going to go, what we were going to do, it's, you know, counting down the days like it often is when you book a trip away. It's all about where are we going, when are we going there, prep everything, and eventually our time came and we went to the lake. And this little clip that I'll play you now is the trailer for the first part. So watch this. This will give you a bit of a generalization of what happened during the first film, and then we're going to look at some other specifics and talk about a few of the important aspects of this kind of fishing. Come on, right, so tell everyone what's going on. How's the journey been so far?
What, so we're going to do a total recap, yeah?
No.
Right, I'm going to try and keep calm and not swear, right? How many mess-ups have you done, Elliot, already?
Handful.
Tell these people, Elliot, what you've done,
Right,
mate.
so I got pulled over by the traffic police for being in the HGV lane. Well, I don't know what's happened. Well, I don't know what's hooked, should I say. I've got something on the end here.
He was watching out the corner of his house outside it, and I knew I really don't want the grief.
So yeah, do you want me to tie your stuff to the boat, geez, because that's going to fall off?
No, don't fuck
No,
mate.
tie it on, because if that falls off...
No, if it goes...
No, don't be silly.
Hold on, you're supposed to hold the rod, didn't you? Do you know what? You're an absolute pleb.
No. No fishing here. Ah, okay. It was nice here though, while it lasted. Would have been beautiful, but it's over. Probably end up sleeping by the car. So there we go, that's the trailer. Now, we've turned up to this lake. It's huge, and the first thing you have to do, in fact, there's two things you have to do. It's all well and good to say, oh, we just need to find some carp and start fishing. But actually, on these kind of places, there's a little bit more to it than that. You need to know where you can fish from. You need to know where the lake, where does the lake go? Because when it's 10 acres, it's easy. You just arrive, you stand in a swim, you look out and you can see all of it. But on a lake like this, that's absolutely not the case. You're dealing with something far bigger, far more complex and far more difficult, not just to catch carp from, but to navigate and work your way around. You know, there'll be areas of the lake which you're not allowed to fish from. There'll be areas of the lake you can't fish from. There'll be bits you want to fish from, bits you don't want to fish from, but ultimately you have to find the carp. But you also are faced with an issue where not just finding them is enough. So there's a lot more to it than just finding them, which can be extremely difficult. And this little clip here I'll play next is it's kind of our first proper look at the lake, which is always exciting, whether it's a big lake or a small lake, home or abroad. Your first look at somewhere, you know, for me, it's always one of my favourite bits. So have a look at this little clip, and it might just sort of give you an idea of what we're, you know, what's going through our head and what we're dealing with at the time.
Yeah, but it makes a pint. You've got two, I've got one.
You've drunk one already, that's why.
Oh dear. It's lovely here, isn't it? Sunny, warm.
Beautiful.
And if you only could imagine how big that piece of water is behind.
Just trying to work out where to park. Always the first part of the jigsaw puzzle.
It's massive, isn't it?
Massive.
Just got to find them, mate.
So we've turned up, basically. We've been driving a very, very long time. Took a long time to get there. But once we arrived, there's a little pub, and there's nothing more appealing than a cold beer after a really long journey. And with a mammoth task ahead of us, you know, we spent a little bit of time in the pub just to chill out, have a little bit of a plan, work out what we're going to do. But as I said a minute ago, just to get an idea of what you're dealing with is very, very difficult on a lake of this size. So you've got a couple of options really. You either walk around, drive around. Some people use a drone. You know, there's lots of ways you can do it. But we'd arrived at this lake you lose, quite often I've found the best way, when you've got 4 or 5 days fishing ahead of you, you've got a long trip, the easy thing to do, and what I did the first few times I went, was you leave really early in the morning, you don't sleep all night, you get there, and then you've got 5 days ahead of you, but you've already sort of, you've lost all your energy on day one. So what I like to do now is turn up, sort of leave as sensibly early as I can on a Monday morning, for example, and you basically lose the first day. So we've turned up to this place, it's best part of 2,000 acres, we need to find some carp, we need to find swims, and that's what we did really. So we got the boats out, we got the gear out, and the first thing to do is just go out onto the lake, have a look round and try and assess not just where the carp might be, but where we're actually able to fish from. And I mentioned something a little while ago, with these public venues, it's not as simple as it seems. A lot of the time, you're doing things you kind of feel like you shouldn't be, or you kind of in the back of your head, you know you shouldn't be, but sometimes everything's fine. You think you've done something wrong and you haven't. It is hard to do everything completely by the book, and it's also hard just to know you're in the right place. You know, that's hard enough sometimes. But this little clip here, the next one, will give you an idea of kind of what we're dealing with in terms of the swims, because when I say swims, I shouldn't be using that term. There were no swims here, you know, so you're looking for places where you can fish from. They're not swims, they're just bits of land or bank or cutouts that give you the ability to actually fish. And that in itself is, you know, that is something that you don't ever think about. You wouldn't have thought, or we certainly didn't think about, but became a real problem for us on our first day. Even though we had seen carp, how were we actually going to fish for them? Jim's just doing some reed clearage. We're trying to. His microphone's got no battery, and I'm about to run out of camera battery, so we'll catch up with you in a bit once we've kind of work out what we're going to do. We're not really sure at the minute. This is really tight, this swim, especially for 2 people. Right, Jim's absolutely buzzing. We're setting up on some jetties.
Why do you have to fit?
I thought you wanted that.
Carnage?
I like carnage. So we're setting up here. Hang on, mate. We're almost certainly not allowed to set up here. But we really ain't got much choice. It's going to be dark very soon. And we need to fish, so
We need to fish.
we're going to fish here. Over and out. Time to get sorted. Jim needs a mic battery as well, otherwise we can't hear him. He's happy now, look. Wait till we get thrown off. Give it half hour. So, for some people, that could easily be, you know, your idea of hell. We've driven a long way. It probably took us, I'd say in our boats, it took us probably 45 minutes, maybe a bit more, just to get to that place. Like that jetty we were on and the little reed bed there, probably 45 minutes in the boat, just driving up the lake, gear loaded into the boat, and you're looking for a swim. You know, we did actually see a carp that first evening. We saw a fish show right out in the middle of a sort of an open expanse of water, and having seen that fish, we need to find somewhere to fish from. Long story short, that proved so much more difficult than we could ever have imagined. A lot of the lake has got a very thick reed bed surrounding it, certainly in that area, and just getting to the bank was almost impossible. But we found that jetty. Jim did not want to fish off that jetty, but I was at the stage where we're losing light, we've been travelling all day, we just needed somewhere we could put our beds up, put the rods. I'd have fished with my rods on the floor if I had to, and listen to the clutches. You know, it was just somewhere to get the rods out and fish. I managed to convince Jim to get his gear out. We unloaded everything, and then sure enough, we were asked to leave. But that for me, you know, for me and some other people, that's part of the fun. But for lots of you listening, you know, I'm sure you'd think turning up, going through all that to unload everything and then be told to move and start again is just, it's not what you want at the end of a long day, I'm sure, for a lot of you. But at the same time, that's part of what makes that kind of fishing interesting, a bit more fun, and very different to what we do here in England. So after the first night, we ended up sleeping by the car, long story short. And we're then on day 2, you know, our first real day at the lake. What do we do now? We'd noticed a guy that was fishing. We wanted to check, we wanted to be in that area, really. So it was like my job to try and locate him, which should be easy. Again, you know, just go and find me, it should be easy. But as I said a minute ago, to get to where he was, probably an hour or so in the boat. So you've got to remember, we're turning up for a week. We've got our boat batteries, but a boat battery takes a long time to charge. Depending on what batteries you've got, they last a bit longer, but they're not the sort of thing you want to be running out. And on a lake of that size, especially when there's a wind on the water, to travel up and down is not easy, and it is no good on your batteries. So rather than drive up the lake an hour, you know, because every time you do that, an hour in the boat, 45 minutes in the boat, you're very much dwindling the battery power you've got. And if you run out of battery on a lake like this, you are in, you know, you're in big trouble. So we'd slept by the car, and I decided to jump in the van and try to locate this angler that we had seen, who was somewhere up one of these big long arms we'd driven past the day before. And in this clip, you'll see just how different these places are to the UK style of fishing. Right, so while Jim guards the gear, I've come for a drive. Now, we came up here yesterday, and I say a drive because it's about 10 minutes in the car to get to where I am now, or about an hour in the boat. So we need to work out what's going on. There's an angler up the bank. He's in the area we want to go in. We need to know when he's going, so I'm going to go and talk to him. I've just seen what looks like another potential area we could fish from, so I'm going to go and have a look at that. You never know, do you? We could get in down here. All fun and games this though. Very, very different to what you'd expect at home, you know. 15 minutes in the car would normally take you well away from the lake. 15 minutes in the car here doesn't even get you round. Well, I bet it gets you around about an eighth of it, so have a little wander, see what's going on. Right, so I'm a live stream amateur, you see, so this is our first one. In my hand, here, I've got some pop-ups, and in the bottom of your screen, where is it? There, you'll see a little picture that says comment to win. So if you've got any questions you would like to ask about the things I'm talking about, could be about these films, it could be about Cypography in general, it could be about the fishing that I'm talking about here. If you do have any questions, put them in the comment section, and as we go through, we will pick questions to answer, and if we choose your question, you'll win a pot of pop-ups. And I think we've got quite a few to give away, so if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. So you probably can start to get a gist now of just like, we're 24 hours in, pretty much. We haven't fished. We haven't even found a swim. So it's what we knew would be a big task was it was almost starting to feel like a much bigger task than we thought, because of things that you just don't realise. And one thing I think may interest people is the equipment and stuff that you need to do this kind of thing. And it's something that every time I've gone away, I've kind of learnt. You come back and you almost add something to your armoury every time you do it. Same as you would in England, you know, when you first start fishing in England, you might have had 2 rods, then you've got 3 rods, then you've got bigger reels, stronger rods, bigger landing net, you know, everything. It's a bit of a progression. But going out to fish these kind of waters, even now, you know, you think, oh, I'm pretty I can probably do this now, and there's always something that you haven't got. And I mentioned a while ago, the batteries. You need a boat if you want to do this sort of thing. You need a boat, you need waders, you need a life jacket, you need a decent engine, you need good batteries, you need to be able to cut your kit down to a sensible amount. You need an echo sounder, there we go, Bridger. You need an echo sounder. That's something that I never took the first few times I went, but it's only once you've used one you realise how good they are. And for those of you that don't know, an echo sounder basically, imagine your deeper sonar that people use all the time. You cast a thing out, it tells you the depths and all that. That's what an echo sounder does. It can tell you where fish are, it can tell you where the weed is, where the gravel is, where the silt is. It does a lot. I'm not quite in a position where I've mastered the use of my echo sounder. I use it largely just to find the depth changes, and anything real drastic you'll notice it. But if you get into it, and obviously a lot of these guys in Europe do, you can really, you know, it can transform your fishing and make it much easier. At the same time, you need to have one, you know, and we learned that the hard way. With the first few trips we did, never had one. Now we've got them, and they are a game changer. But on this lake, we met a guy who's got an electric outboard, a petrol outboard, sorry. So because the lake is so big, rather than relying on the battery all the time, which you kind of can't if you want to go up, you know, want to go around it. I don't know how many miles round it would be if you were to sort of lap the lake following the margin, but it'd be a lot, I know that much. So if you want to do that and you're only using batteries, you've got no hope of doing it. Put it that way, you know, you're going to run whatever you've got out very quickly. So that's something else we learn. And like I say, we're always learning stuff. And the first part of these 3 films, so we've got part 1 and 2, which came out, I think part 2 came out on Thursday last week, part 1 came out Monday last week, and part 3 comes out tonight at 5:30. So if you're watching this now, part 3 comes out tonight. But the first film, believe it or not, was all about getting into a swim and getting our rods out. And yeah, that was far more difficult than you would ever imagined. And in this next clip, you're gonna have a little look at the swim that we were fishing in, the rods, and we'll talk about what we had to do in order to get into a position where we are rods out and in a position where we might actually catch a carp. Our last job of the day is to get all these into the rests. How about them for some empty spools? We need to get them onto the rests ASAP, then we can actually chill out for the first time in a very long time. There we go, look. Rods are out on the sticks. And now it is dinner time. What we got for dinner, lover?
Well, chicken, and but as per usual, you haven't provided sides.
I have, I'm about to do it. Listen to him, look at you got sunglasses, Marks. Look at me a minute. Turn to the side a bit. No. Oh, look at that. Lovely. That smells glorious. This is my addition to dinner. Mushroom rice. We've earned this meal.
Do you like my ghost class of stripes? You got sunburn, I only get stripes, mate.
Right, so one of the things, probably the first thing you would have seen and noticed is the rods. So we're 8 rods out in one, I'm going to call it a swim because it was the most fishable area we could find. Because we'd seen carp show the day before, they had showed so much further out than what you'd class as a realistic distance to fish. And we're basing everything on what you do in the UK. So if you see a carp show at 300 yards in England, it's kind of, you don't even consider that as being an option. But when you go abroad and you're fishing on lakes of this size, 300 yards is not that far. And I always make sure to go prepared to fish those ranges and beyond. And luckily I did, because these are the situations and these are the kind of venues where, you know, you have to be prepared for that. So these days I would use deep spools from Western Developments. I've got tournament reels, but they make a deep spool which enables you to get a lot more line on. your diameters of your braids is a massive thing. I use floating braid most of the time, and in this instance, I think I had £30 Apex braid on, which is a quarter braid. Used it a lot. It's pretty much what I've used since I've been going out to Europe. But it enables me to get, I think, 650 to 700 meters on each spool, which is a long way. And we needed it in this situation, you know, we really did. But one thing had happened, where I'd spooled up with it a long time before, I was pretty much lacking, say, 150, 200 yards, just over the times I've been out there. But where these fish had shown, you know, it wasn't 700 meters away. It was probably something around 350 to 500 yards. We'd seen a couple, and they were that sort of range. So what you'd normally do is go out in the boat, you take your rod out with you, you find a spot, you drop the rig, put your bait round it in the area where you've seen a carp or whatever it is, or somewhere that you like, whether you're using an echo sounder to find a spot or not. You go out there, you drop your rig, and you drive back to the bank. But because we wanted to fish so far out, we decided that the best way to do it would be one of us holds the rod on the bank and the other one tows the rig out. You drive out into the lake as far as you can go whilst on the phone to the other angler, and when you're running out of line, they say, you're running out of line, you need to drop the rig. So you take, you know, turn the power off on the engine, straighten everything up, get ready, and then with the line under tension, lower it down offside the boat, drop it onto the bottom. And that enabled us to have all 8 rods as far out as we could go without running the risk of going out there with the rod, lowering the rig down onto the spot, towing back, and then when you get 50 yards back from the bank, you run out of line. So that's how we ended up fishing, and for the first night, that's what we did. We fished all of our rods right out into the abyss, really. You know, we were fishing, it's hard to describe these bits of water. We call it an arm. The lake's got arms, and we're fishing in the middle of one of them, hoping to intercept fish from this area. You know, the fish can go to several different places, so immediately in those situations, you give yourselves a few options. Off of this main arm, you've got lots of little bays. As soon as you go into one of those bays, you're fishing solely for carp that are in that bay. If you fish in these intersections, you're fishing for carp that might be entering 4 different bays but have to travel past you to get to them, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the area we were in. And yeah, that was where we, for the first time, we were rods out. That's kind of where the first film finishes, and it's where we did actually hook our first fish from. So before I start talking about part 2, well, we'll go through a couple of the questions. I think is there a couple of questions? Yeah. And then we'll look at the trailer for the second part of the film.
Do you do any research on the lake or area before you left the UK?
So, in terms of research, not really. Most of the times, I'm not going to say no, not at all, because that would be a lie. So, don't do a great amount of research. There's a few people I trust and who I talk to who sort of point me in the direction of places to go and have a look at. I generally get a gist of how big is the lake, what sort of fishing is it. That's quite important, you know, what sort of fishing am I going to be doing, because you do need to go prepared. What do the carp look like? Are there many carp in there? You know, don't do loads of research. The general questions I ask are, how big's the lake? Where is it? Because I need to go there. Can you night fish? Can you use a boat? What are the carp like? Not necessarily size. I'm not too bothered about how big they are at the moment. It's nice if there are big carp, obviously, but it's nice to fish for nice carp if you can. And that's about it, you know. But you could do a lot more research than I do, but that's kind of part of the fun for me. But again, it's cost a lot of time in travel. You know, you get somewhere with a better plan, you could probably spend a lot more time fishing. I spend a lot of time driving around, it does seem. We'll go and have a look at here, we'll go and have a look at there. Do a lot of the exploring. Rather than doing it over the phone, I actually quite like to do it whilst I'm out there, in person. You know, go and look at the places. Because I've spoke to some people before, they tell you something, turns out to be completely not true. So, you know, and it's best to make your own mind up. But in terms of, you know, the actual answer to your question, not a great deal of prep or homework, but enough to make sure and try to ensure that where you're going, you know, is going to be worth the travel, because it does take a while to get there a lot of the time.
We've got another one from Frank Reed again. The lake is 2,000 acres, 3 times the size of Bill Reservoir. How do you narrow down the fish location?
So, what happened on there? Well, what we did there, like I said, the first thing was we spent a long time, the first day, out in the boat, driving around, burning our batteries, looking for carp. And because of the time of day, it was evening time when we sort of really got looking. It's not a bad time to see carp. In fact, it's quite a good time. It's, I would say, all over the world, the evening time is a good time to see carp showing. And we did. Or Jim see the first one, and after that, we locked in on an area, and we see, I think 2 or 3 it was that first evening. So that's the first thing, you know. Try to look for carp. But in terms of the area, the first thing we did was look at where the wind was blowing, because on a massive lake of that size, you'd like to think at least some of the carp are going to be following the wind. So use your Google Maps or whatever. Look on the map, see where the wind is blowing, and then look in those areas. And of course, on a lake this size, there's a lot of water where the wind is blowing, but you're just narrowing it down as best as you can with each, you know, hour that you spend there. This area looks good, have a look as best as you can. If you don't see anywhere, you know, have a look somewhere else. You kind of have to do it like that. You can't spend too long in one place, but at the same time you need to do it thoroughly enough, I suppose, to ensure that you do see fish. So we fished where we saw the carp the first night, and then the second day I lost the fish. I'd wanted to move. I didn't feel like we were quite in the right place. We'd seen carp out there, and during the night I heard carp. We heard a really big carp actually, and I did end up losing a fish. Whether it was a carp or a catfish, I'll never know, but it was a big fish. It was not a small, whatever it was not small. I ended up out in the boat. There was a massive wind on at the time, and that was pretty scary. It's probably the first time I've ever been in a boat and scared. 30 odd mile an hour northeasterly, I think, was blowing, and I'm out there in my little boat, and it was dodgy. I lost the fish, you know. Long story short, I did lose the fish, and it was because of that our whole session changed. You know, I was really, really down in the dumps by this point, and I get a bit like that if I lose a carp. Jim is has a very different mindset. You know, everything's for a reason, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't really let things get to him. I'm a little bit more reactive, I suppose. I get a bit more grumpy. Both Gemma and Bridger, who are sitting next to me, who know me probably better than anyone, are laughing. So yeah, I lose my head a little bit easier, especially when your fishing's going wrong. But if I wasn't with it's weird how things happen, because if I wasn't fishing with Jim, I reckon, and I was fishing on my own, I'd have just moved that morning and I never would have hooked that fish. But Jim wanted us to stay. We did stay, and then I lost the fish. And if Jim hadn't convinced me to still go and have a look round, I'd have just got my rods back out, fished there because I'd lost one, and our session would never have turned out how it did. So everything happens for a reason, as he told me. But yeah, watch the second trailer, so this gives you an idea of the second film, and then we'll look at another little clip, which was sort of during our walk to the pub to drown our sorrows. Jim,
Look,
you're away, hurry up. Run, that's it, run. I was really hoping the next time I was talking to this camera was going to be with a big grin on my face. Unfortunately, it isn't.
oh mate, So do you know what? You go for a walk and things change, don't it? You go from doom to gloom, innit?
I lost the fish. I got took out by a speedboat yesterday. I think we mentioned that, but we've got a big wind on. Just going out in the boat is hard enough, but you know, with a fish attached, with the trailing line, it was just a nightmare, the whole thing.
I've cast out and this rod has only been out maximum 2 minutes.
Find them, bait them, catch them. Is that what he's going to say?
Cheers, Lily.
I took the words out of your mouth. Come on, let's let it go. I want to catch one as well. Look at that. All I wanted was a carp from this lake, but that is a bit special and more than I could ever have hoped for. Yeah? Right, so this film, things really start livening up. As I said a little while ago, the first part of the film, it's all about getting into a position where we're rods out, we feel like we're going to catch something, and it's easy not to feel like you're going to catch anything on a lake like this. As you'll see from the trailer, things liven up a bit, and we do eventually start to catch carp. So before we got to that stage, like I said, I'd lost a fish, and we decided, or Jim decided, let's go to the pub, we'll have a beer. We started our trip with a beer in this little pub. We'll go to the pub, we'll have a beer, rethink things, we'll have a little look around. And whilst we were on the way to the pub, Jim spotted, I never saw this dog, but Jim spotted a dog, which he then became obsessed with finding. And he's good at finding carp. Turns out he ain't quite as good at finding dogs, but have a look at this. This is the kind of enthusiasm you're dealing with when you're with this man. Yeah, quite a weird clip, but I thought worth showing you anyway.
Where's it gone? I have to hunt it. It's gone down there on that path. We'll go that way. Look, we've got to see this, mate. Oh my God, look at that cloudy water. Mate, it's disappeared. I ain't joking. It's fucking huge. You're gonna shit yourself.
So we're going to the pub. We're now going dog hunting.
This is depressing me. All right, look, I know you think this is gonna be like an attention-seeking thing, but trust me, it's the biggest dog I've ever seen. Looks like a fucking huge wolf. We've definitely got to get it on film. Mate, we were only round the corner from it.
Any more questions? Right, so there we go. That's what you're dealing with. So Jim had seen this dog, and as I said a little while ago, everything happens for a reason. We did eventually bump back into the dog again, you know, under the most strange circumstances, and that kind of summed up this trip. Things happened. It turned into a very special trip, and lots of weird things happened along the way, which kind of made it what it was. Not just catching the carp, you know, how we caught them, and all these strange occurrences that happened along the way. So we'd gone to the pub just to have a few drinks, like I say, calm me down. That was the idea, really. We'd spent a little while looking for this dog, but we wanted to walk we call it the scenic route, because for a little while we're walking along the road, and if you're going to walk somewhere, you may as well walk around the lake, just in case you see something, you know. It takes a little while to walk somewhere on a lake of that size, and it did. It probably took us half an hour walking. We'd left all our gear, we sort of stashed it up a little bit. Hopefully we were going to come back and our gear was still there. It was, fortunately, but we walked a long way, and I don't know, maybe 5 minutes from the pub, something like that. We came to this bay. The first night we spent, we were on the end of the wind, which is always a good place to start, and we hadn't fished, we just slept by the car. We heard a few fish that night, but they sounded really small, like very small, and you get a lot of hybrids and stuff out and bass and weird species that you don't get in England. Adjacent to the sort of first bay we were in was another bay, and what actually happened was as we're walking past that bay on the end of the wind, we're having a good look because obviously it looks good. Warm wind, we're there in the spring, and it was shallow water out there. We didn't notice until we stood and looked, but quite quickly we saw carp show. And once you've seen a carp on a lake like this, and I'm not speaking from experience because I haven't fished many lakes of this size, and I'm not going to pretend I have, but there's one thing you hear over the years, if you talk to anyone that does, it's big lake carp behave like carp. And that might sound weird, but carp are not supposed to be the most difficult species of fish to catch, you know, and they can be on a pressured lake, they can be on a lake that gets constant angling pressure, where they're bombarded, they're stressed out from day to day, and they're always trying to avoid capture, because that is what happens on a small lake where they're always fished for. But on a big lake of this size, that doesn't see the angling pressure that some lakes do, generally if you can find a carp, you will stand a good chance of catching them. And that's what happened. We saw fish, we decided we'd watch them for a while, see what was going on, go to the pub, have our beer, you know, that we said we would have, drown my sorrows, and then we'd plan an attack, you know, how are we going to catch these carp. So that's what happened. We went to the beer and then we did eventually fish, but something that we could never have imagined was how quickly we'd get the first bite. And Jim got the rods out first, you know. Jim's there, he's the angler, I'm the cameraman, I'm fishing as well, you know. So Jim gets his rods out first, and he's basically fishing English style, hinge stiff rigs. He's cast the rod out to these fish. We'd watched them for a while, seen them showing, cast the rod out, and Jim gets a bite. So we've put the first rod out. Like I say, there are no swims here. So you're pulling the van up in a place where it looks like you're legally allowed to park your car, which we did. Park the van, which is one side of the road. We've walked across the road, gone down to the water's edge, and cast out. Jim's cast out his first rod. Once the rod is in position, put a bit of bait out, walk back to the car across the road, and whilst we're at the car, Jim has had a bite. Now, yesterday, or a couple of days before, we put this clip on the internet, and the classic internet thing happened where something gets blown completely out of proportion, and I was half tempted not to mention this because I don't want the same thing to happen again, but actually I thought, no, let's address it. We'll show the clip again so you can watch it, and you can take into account that I actually had someone ring me today. Apparently Jim had a bite and it was running for 3.5 minutes before he picked the rod up. Don't know where that came from, but these are the weird things that happen. You had people saying that Jim's fish care was terrible. He's never, you know, he should never be allowed to fish again, blah, blah, blah. Now, one thing I can assure you, and lots of people will vouch for him on this, no one's fish care is as good as his. I've never seen anyone as concerned about fish as he is. I've never known anyone, I've filmed with a lot of people over the years, I've never known anybody to be so concerned about putting the fish back in the water. I've never seen anybody so concerned about putting the treatments on their mouths, on their sores, you know, carp care. No one drills it down people's throats as much as he does. He's always telling people to do it, So watch this clip, maybe make your own mind up to a degree, but once you've watched it, I'm then going to explain to you what I know to be the case and why I think that yesterday was a massive overreaction, and a quite unjustified overreaction at that.
Look.
You're away, hurry up. You're away. Jim.
Look at the rod.
Yeah,
look.
go, quick, run.
No,
Have you got a
I'm
net?
not running.
Have you got a net?
Yes.
Run! Run!
Nope.
Run!
Nope.
Run, that's it, run. That's gone with intensity. Go and get the fucking rod.
No.
Come, I'm going to pick it up then.
Leave it. Fish is way to the left trying to get out. I done my green cross code, you didn't.
Okay, so what you've just seen is Jim stood by the car. He's got a bite. He's run across. He hasn't. I think the thing that annoyed everybody is that he didn't run. Now, why that's a problem, I don't really know. And obviously, I'm going run, 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 run. The reason I'm telling him to run is because we're at this massive lake. This is the first bite that we've had, and I am excited. I want him to go and pick up this rod, play the fish. Now, I can see why people might watch it and think, oh, he should have run to his rod, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. That's a matter of opinion. But the fish care thing, like not running to your rod is not bad fish care. That fish was not in any danger. This, you know, it wasn't going anywhere. And the things that were said off the back of that at work for me were just completely unjust. And also bear in mind, you'll see there, and you would have heard Jim say, there was a road in the way. So he's got to put, I think it took him 30 seconds from the minute he got the bite to the minute he's got the rod in his hand. 30, 35 seconds, which, okay, might seem like a long time when you're used to being stood in your swim next to your rods. But as I said a minute ago, this kind of fishing, this kind of lake, it's not like that. You know, the day before we're fishing 500 meters out. So even if we are stood on our rods and the minute we get a bleep, you pick the rod up, you know, that fish is 500 meters away from where you're stood. In this instance, Jim probably flicked that lead 40 yards out. It's shallow water, a bit of weed. All the fish is going to do is go out into the lake, and that's all it did do. The reason Jim didn't run to the rod is because he's doing his waders up. He's got a road to cross. And if you watch the clip back, you'll see I'm telling him to run. He's saying no. And if you look at it carefully, he's looking left, he's looking right, and there are cars coming past. And if he had run, he would probably have got hit by a car. So we then get to the other side of the road. He eventually does pick up the rod. Now, like I say, it's not the kind of stuff that you would normally see, but our films are not the kind of films that I guess you would normally see. You know, we film everything as it happens, there and then. We try not to hide anything. You know, if we do something wrong, we'll still show it, as long as it's, you know, there's never fish in danger. And all I'm getting at here is the comments that came off the back of that video going online were, some of the things that were said were just silly, really. Because as I've already said, you don't accuse someone of not caring about carp or having bad fish care because they didn't run to their rod. You know, if he was snag fishing, yes, I agree. Say what you want, but we've got a boat to retrieve any carp we need to if it gets into a bit of weed. We knew what the swim was like. You know, we'd flown a drone around. We know what the swim's like. You can see the bottom everywhere. It's shallow. It's clear. The fish was going nowhere, and sure enough, the fish was landed. No problem, with no harm. And also, Jim did not get run over by a car. So, yeah, it's something I wanted to talk about because we had a few people asking us why we sort of hid away from the situation. That's not what I did. I took the stuff off of social because Jim wanted it off because he was getting a load of grief that he didn't really deserve. And I think anyone who really knows what they're on about would agree. How many of you have walked into your mate's swim just up the bank? You know, 30 seconds isn't a long time. If you're snag fishing, you don't leave your rods. But there are times where we've got a little bit of leeway to do those kind of things. And there was certainly no harm in that clip there. No fish were harmed. And we'll show you the clip now of the fish because it was our first carp from that lake. You know, that is a moment that, for, you know, you never know if you're going to get that moment. You never know, and you know, if you are lucky enough to get that moment, what it will be like. But so this was the carp he hooked, and was the first fish of many from the lake.
I've got sheep everywhere. Been watched. Let's get him up and have a quick look at this mirror. Super charged up. Well, this is what it's all about. We went for a little walk together, and we just happened to look out and see a carp show, and it just shows you massive move. A beer in between, and then we decided to go and have a plate full of chips and another beer, just another one for Elliot, and we call it Mind Warp. And I've cast out, and this rod has only been out maximum 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And they're showing over the bait. I thought I'd gone a bit mad. I put 100 baits out there.
Keep him there a sec. 36. Mega.
Oh, and then I'm getting shouted at. I've got to do a green cross code. There's a fucking road there. And it's going, run, run, run. No, don't need to run.
Okay, so at the start of that clip, you'd have seen the cars watching. One of the crazy things that was happening. As the session went on, we'd catch more and more carp. You know, that was basically, we'd found them by this point. And as I said a little while ago, like once you found them, that's the hard bit. And catching them is almost easier, can almost be easy. But the locals that were driving past were in absolute amazement. And at times we would have 6, 7, 8 cars pulled up at once. The whole road would be blocked and they would just be sat in their cars watching out the window. We had people coming up to us asking us to have pictures with us with the fish. Like, it was insane. And I've had that a few times. Because of these public waters, they are public in a sense that they're not behind lock and key like you kind of would be used to fishing in England. A lot of the waters here, you know, you're at your syndicate, you're behind a fence, or you're a bit more out the way. A lot of these places, you get a bit in. You either see no one at all, or you see quite a few people. And on anywhere that has traffic from the public, like, they're always amazed in the fishing. But this place was, this was insane. I'd never seen so much interaction from them. Some of them absolutely loved it, and it was actually quite a nice experience to have. Even with the biggest carp, I've got some really cool pictures with some really nice carp with people that got involved. So yeah, that was that little snippet there at the start of that clip. That was. We had one guy get out of his tractor, pulled his tractor up, middle of the road, comes down the hill, talking to us in French, just to say well done, and look at the carp. They live by this lake. They travel around this lake probably all the time, and they have no idea what lives in it. So these people are seeing for the first time what this lake contains, and that's quite a nice part of it. Or it certainly was here. So Jim's Court is one. And like I say, things really from that point onwards, they get, the session just gets better and better and better and better, because we've done the hard bit now. We've found the fish, and it's then just about catching as many as we could. And my first carp from there was absolutely beautiful. One of my favourites that I caught that session, definitely. But like, if you could choose a fish to sort of go in with as your first bite, I'd probably have chosen Mirror, to be honest. But as commons go, this was a pretty special one. Look at that. Well over 1,000 acres of water. We've moved and we've caught a couple of carp pretty quickly. It's getting dark. I'm buzzing. Upper 30?
Yeah, mate.
Got to be around that, innit, Jim?
Yeah, mate.
37s, 38s?
Yeah.
What a carp. Look at the colour of that. Big old set of lips, proper hoover on him. Chuffed to bits. What a way to start. So yeah, that carp, like, we didn't weigh it, didn't really care, to be honest. It was just nice to, it was probably 38 pound. That's kind of what in our heads we called it in the end. But that carp, perfect mouth. God knows when that fish was caught last. Maybe it was never caught. This is the beautiful thing about this kind of place, is you just don't know. It might have been caught last week. I very much doubt it. And in reality, they probably go years between captures. And some of them probably get caught once in their lives. There'll be fish that don't get caught, But, like, this was my first carp now, and obviously I'd seen Jim catch one, and you can see how happy he was, but it's a very surreal feeling. Like, by the time we got to the end of the session, we'd caught so many carp that you forget the first one. But yeah, that first carp from a lake of that size, under those circumstances, bearing in mind I'd lost that fish in the morning, and I was very much down in dumps at that point. That was the beginning of those two fish there. They were the beginning of something really special that you will see the full you'll really see how good things got in the third film, which comes out tonight. But yeah, that common, perfect place to start. And one interesting thing about the whole thing is that we ended up catching all these carp with traditional English style tactics. And this is something that I've learned more and more, that you have to be prepared to fish in that way, no matter how big the lake is, no matter how unlikely you feel it will be that you need to adapt that kind of fishing style. So often you do, and there's so much to be said for just seeing a carp show and casting at it. So yeah, the English tactics, you know, and this is Jim, this fishing suited him down to the ground, you know, and he was very much prepared for it already, as this little clip here will show you. We awoke just after it got light, and straight away Jim decided to crank the rods in and reposition them, top them up with bait and have everything fresh and ready for the day ahead.
All I want the pop-up to do is to sink, which it does. Right, curve the choddy bit. Sure that's up a little bit more. Yeah, that's it. Right, now we're going to curve it, push it into position, make sure everything's in line with everything. Thing of beauty, out it goes. Got a nice drop on that one. Sometimes you get like soft drops.
So yeah, that, you know, that style of fishing, it's really important. And I've been a few times and I've not took that kind of kit, and you think, oh, what have I done here? You know, because that situation we found there, 1 minute we're in a swim, we're fishing into this huge expanse of water. We've got 8 rods out there as far as they will possibly go. And you feel like that's how you're going to be catching them. And why wouldn't you? You're on such a big lake. But then an hour later you find carp showing on the end of a wind, and you need to be flicking out 2.5 ounce leads and hinge stiff rigs, and it's very easy not to bring, you don't want to take too much stuff away with you, or I don't. I never want to take too much stuff away with me, but the last thing you want to do is not to take enough, and you do need to be prepared for every situation. And the last time I went, I took all my English kit, and I took all my, not the same rods and reels, but you know, I took my tackle box with all the stuff I use in the UK, and then the same as what I use in France. And Jim pretty much uses exactly the same stuff in the UK as he does in France. So less to think about, I suppose, and it's probably a good way of doing it. But yeah, we ended up catching all these fish, throwing sticking boilies. And because the swim, like I say, we'd put the drone up, we'd had a look at the area, and it was shallow, murky water. There's a bit of weed about, you know. It was pretty much just a case of casting and fishing for a drop. So that's all you really had to do, you know, see where they were showing, ping them out there. If you get a decent drop, sweet. If you don't, rechuck it and throw and stick the boilies out there. And because I think, in hindsight, the reason this session pans out how it does, and you'll see this, like I say, in tonight's film, we didn't fish too far out. And when you're in the end of a bay and there are carp, to start with, they were quite close to the bank, 30 yards, some of them. We probably fished at 45, 50 yards. The fish are only going to go in one direction once you start catching them. So every time you hook one, they're going to drift probably a bit further away from you. And if the minute you start going further, and you're going to essentially just push them further and further and further out of the bay. And because we stuck to the sort of short range style fishing, we didn't go too long. We ended up catching a lot of carp. By the time we left, my friend actually came into the swim. By that final morning, we only did 3 days in that swim. But by the final morning, I could tell, and we could tell, that the fish had pushed further out. We didn't get as many bites that morning. Started to see fish showing much further out in the lake. And sure enough, the guys who moved in after us, they had to, and the wind changed as well, and the weather changed. You know, that's a big thing on these kind of lakes. the weather on any lake is a big thing, but probably more so in this kind of place. But by that final morning, you know, we'd caught a lot of carp, and they had moved further out, and the people who went in after us had to end up fishing 250, 300 metres out with the boat from where we were to then get to the fish. So, you know, it was nice for us. We had it easy in a way, but we kind of did ourselves a favour by sticking to that kind of fishing. I think it's always worth considering, no matter where you are fishing, small lake or a big lake. When you start catching fish, they're not going to retreat towards you to get away from the pressure. They're always going to go further from you. So sometimes it pays just to fish as close as you can fish while still getting bites, you know, because sometimes you have to go further to get the bites. But in other instances, you can keep things closer to you and you'll catch more because of that. And I think that happened in this situation. But yeah, one of the carp, like I say, I'm still kind of talking about the second part of the film. I'm not going to talk too much about the third film because that comes out tonight. I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Some crazy stuff happens. But this next carp I caught, if you think typical French carp, and years ago I was very much against this kind of fish. I'm not against it, but it didn't interest me. Now it does. My eyes have been well and truly opened, and I've seen things, caught things, and experienced things that I never thought I would. And this carp was one of them, a really special fish, and one that, yeah, have a look.
I think we ought to call that one free scale, didn't you?
So what, don't mind what we call it. Look at that. All I wanted was a carp from this lake, but that is a bit special and more than I could ever have hoped for.
You know it.
Oh, calm down. Calm down. Hey.
Do you want to do the other side?
Yeah, hang on. Right, well, Jim weren't very happy when I woke him up for this fish.
Tell him why, though.
Because he was asleep, he didn't feel very well. But I'm sure we're all in agreement.
And you put a head torch in my face.
And I put a head torch on him. But as you can see, I was pretty excited, and this is why. Incredible. Incredible carp.
I think the smile says it all, mate.
Yeah.
Top fish.
Mwah. Thank you so much. Blown away by that. Look at that fish. You can have another kiss.
Go on, lover, let her swim free.
Thank you very much. Right, so on the subject of the throwing stick in and the English style of fishing, as I said earlier, and as you'll see in the, I'll get good at this, so that way, whoop, there, see there, comment to win, comment in the comment section, ask us a question about the things we're talking about, and we'll pick our favourite questions, and you will win some pop-ups from ACP Baits, which is the bait company that Jim uses. So the hook baits and stuff that he was using in this film to catch all of these carp, or in these films, I should say, to catch all of these carp, you can win by commenting in the comment section. So yeah, if you have any questions regarding anything we've spoken about so far, whether it's the rigs, the baiting, the lake, the fishing, the films, the membership, whatever it is, feel free to ask away. But yeah, that carp that you've just seen, I've just shown you, you know, probably one of the best carp I've ever caught, to be quite honest. And to catch it from a lake like that, you know, it's, yeah, made it a hell of a lot sweeter. But as I said throughout this, you know, the third film, we never planned to make 3 films out of this. You know, 3-hour-long films they are. You know, you could easily have gone away for a week here and come away with one 1-hour film, if you're lucky. It just happened that we caught so many carp, and there were so many interesting things that happened. Like I said about the dog, watch the film, you'll see about the dog. He makes his appearance in the end. But yeah, loads of crazy things happened in order to see us go home with 3 crazy films, basically. And like I say, the third and final one is live tonight. If you're not a Cypography member, then you can't watch the film. So we have got now, you know, for those of you that don't know, Cypography is a video subscription service. We call ourselves a Netflix of carp fishing because that's essentially what we do. We have hundreds of videos, 700 and something videos now, And for $7.99 a month, you will have unlimited access to all of these. And you know, it's with that, as a member, that you get to watch these films. Our films are not like the typical stuff you see on YouTube. I stand by that. You know, we live by that, really. And that is kind of our aim, to produce stuff that you don't see every day for free on the internet. You know, that's not what we're about. We want our content to be different, and we want it to be as good as possible, and we want you guys to enjoy it. But, you know, you do have to be a member to watch our film. So if you're not already, maybe worth considering. Tonight's film is pretty epic, in my own opinion. And I'm sure lots of you will agree. You know, the last two films we've put out, the first two parts of this 3-film series, we've had some great feedback, and I only hope that tonight is like the perfect ending to those, you know, those 3 films. So check it out. If you're a member, make sure you watch it, and if you're not a member, maybe consider becoming one. So we'll do some questions now, shall we?
Yeah,
Nick, a
Wayne
couple?
Upton. Is the sense of achievement from catching a lake like that better than catching a target fish from England, given the size, scale, and unknown quantity out there?
So the question was, is the sense of achievement of catching a carp from a lake of that size better than catching a target fish? I would say no, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're fishing in England on a pressured lake, you're fishing against a lot of carp anglers. Generally, these kind of things, catching a target fish is a progression. It doesn't happen quickly. And there's also something quite special about choosing a certain carp and, you know, dedicating large amounts of time and your life, essentially, to catching that carp. It's the kind of fishing I've pretty much done my whole life, is target fishing. And because it takes so long, and because at times it almost feels impossible, or that it won't happen or whatever, when it does, you know, that's a feeling that's very hard to beat. But fishing lakes like this, a lot of the fishing I've done when I've gone away, and this lake is a prime example of that, you just want to catch one carp. If you catch one, from there you build, and, you know, anything after that's a bonus. You just want to catch a carp. So I think that the achievement is, you could argue one is less achievable than the other, of course, but, you know, even the carp we caught here from a lake of this size, you know, I still think that a target, you know, a target fish that you've really angled for consistently and you've thought about over time and time again is more of a sense of achievement. But, you know, both in their own right are, yeah, pretty good.
Right, we've got Darren Winstone. How'd you go about getting permits for the different regions while you were in France?
Right.
We could put the Samir video up.
Yeah, so in terms of the permits, it's quite difficult for the different parts of France, Belgium, Holland, wherever really. It is quite difficult. I'm lucky. I've got friends that I ring up and say, "How do I do this? Can you talk me through it on the phone?" There is a video somewhere, I think Samir did, but it's difficult. Really, it is, and I think it's kind of made difficult as well. But you'd have to find someone that could probably talk you through it, or just Google it. But like I say, it's not easy. It doesn't exist. It's not easy. Yeah, like I say, I have managed to do it through people that have helped me, and I think it's probably the same for a lot of people.
Did you previously not like French carp?
Not really, no. I didn't like French carp.
I was asked why previously didn't you like French carp?
No. So, right. So someone's asked, did I not like French carp? That's not what I meant when I said that. So, for a long time, I was so wrapped up in fishing in England and all that it had to offer that I thought that the thought of going abroad, fishing abroad, it just did not interest me. It really didn't. I did a bit of it with Corda. We used to go away on the filming trips with them, and to be honest, that did open my eyes a little bit as to what was out there. You know, because you go to some beautiful lakes and you catch a really nice carp. But I was still very much one-track minded. Like all I would ever think about for my own fishing certainly was going back to the same lake week in, week out and trying to catch one carp. I'm now at a stage where I've done that for a long time, probably 15 years I've been doing that. you know, you're fishing the same lake all the time, a lot of the same people, you know all the carp that are in there, you know all the swims, and it does get a bit repetitive. I still love it, but I never saw myself, years ago, I never saw myself not doing that kind of fishing, and anything that wasn't that kind of fishing, I used to think was pointless. And I now realise how wrong I was, because going away to these kind of places that I've been talking about now are something totally different, and they're really good fun. That's the bottom line.
Right. Jamie Gibson's asked, it's his first time in France fishing next week. What changes should he make compared to the UK?
Depends where he's going, doesn't it, really? I would say, if it's your first time fishing in France next week, I wouldn't really change anything. You're probably going to be I would imagine you're going to be going to like a bookable holiday venue, something like that. In which case, I don't think you need to change anything. I've not fished those kind of venues, but I think I wouldn't mind betting that more people make these drastic changes to what they would normally do when they go fishing, because they're going to France for a week, and then when they get there, they probably didn't need to make any of the changes they did. You know, if you know how to catch a carp from England, you will still be able to catch a carp from France. The only things I would consider is you ain't nipping home, so make sure you take what you need with you, because if you don't, you're kind of in trouble. But do your homework wherever it is you're going.
It's just message Mirror Lake near Limoges.
Right. So yeah, you're going. Yeah. So if you're good, you know where you're going. Find out what you can about the lake. Find out what sort of fishing you're going to be doing. I would like to think on those kind of lakes, and this is the difference between, as I was saying about the difference between a public lake and the sort of your holiday venues. If you go into a public lake, you're not going to have anything there for you. There's no food, no catering, no bait, nothing. But I'd imagine that this Mirror Lake, or wherever you said it was, will have an element of your trip catered for you. So take that into account. And on top of that, it's just things like bait. Really, you don't want to be running out of bait. You don't want to not have enough bait, but you don't need to take tons and tons of bait. I've done that way too many times. Yeah, actually now, yeah, I take shelf life bait with me now. Something I never thought I'd use, but the bait works. Shelf life boilies that I use, they seem wicked, to be fair. Like I can't really see a difference between the two. Yes, they're harder. And would I use them in England? No, I wouldn't. I would use a shelf life. I would use a freezer bait in England. But when I've been going abroad, a shelf life, what it means is you don't waste bait. I've wasted a lot of bait over the last year or so. You take a load of freezer bait out there. You don't want to run out. You don't want to not have enough. So you take more than you need. And sometimes I've took 50 key and I've only used 5. That's a lot of wasted bait. So take shelf life bait wherever you're going. I would advise you. Cover yourself for every situation. Just work out what it is you'll need based on where you're going, because I'd like to think that information will be available to you.
The Crazy Blind Carp. Any tips for getting the distance with his throwing stick?
Any tips for getting distance with your throwing stick?
I'm guessing that is as they always split, but I don't think it's Rich split.
Right, so yeah, if you boilies always going to so boilies do split in a throwing stick. That's the reality. It depends on the bait you're using. You can air dry them. So the problem I've always found with air drying baits is they're a lot lighter. So even though you can get them further, so by air drying them, you make them hard, and they're less likely to split. But as you air dry them and take all the moisture out of them, and they go like little bullets, but you won't get the range. You're far more affected by the wind. So my advice, always a good one, and that's something I've used a lot of these, is to use oil. Oil will harden the skin of a bait. So air dry them for a while, not like bullets though. You haven't got to go silly with them. Air dry them for 24 hours or so. Coat them in oil, and it will toughen them up. But it does depend largely on what bait you use, because some baits are far more prone to exploding when they come out of a stick. And the other thing to do is wet the throwing stick. So before every 50 baits you put out, just dip the stick in the water and give it a wet.
Mark Logan, how much have you learnt from fishing with Jim, and has it changed the way you fish at all?
So, sorry, I'm choking a little bit. I would say I've not done loads of fishing with Jim. I've filmed him quite a lot. The one thing I learned, the main thing you learn from someone like Jim is it's a tenacity thing. It's more about always being up early, always going the extra mile. Like I would say mine and Jim's fishing style is very, very different. And actually, Jim, I think Jim and to a lot of people is very different. It's all about everything. Everything is about seeing a carp and casting to where the carp is. A much more simplified version. All of Jim's effort goes into locating fish, which is a given. You know, that should happen. But I think some anglers, some people, and myself included, maybe spend a lot more time thinking about other stuff that's happening on a lake, whereas Jim it's all about finding fish. I'd say the one thing I'd say I've learned is it doesn't matter how old you are, and that's not me calling Jim old, even though he is old. Doesn't matter how old you are, you can still work hard, because I think he would put most 25-year-old carp anglers who think they're in their prime. I think, you know, you wouldn't win a battle of who's going to work the hardest with him. So it doesn't matter who you are, how much time you've got. I think if you work as hard as he does every day, you'll catch yourself a lot more carp, no matter what rigs you're going to use or whatever, you know. And I think he's proof that something that will present pretty much wherever you cast it, like a hinge stiff rig or a chod rig, that alone, a throwing stick, some boilies, because pretty much all he uses, and just that mental capacity and drive to constantly work towards finding a carp or an opportunity, that's enough to catch you a lot of carp. And I think a lot of people probably think it's a lot more complex than that. So, yeah, that.
Right, no, I remember this is the last question. Craig Edwards, any lovers tips with Jim when you're away?
So yeah, I've had a few. The worst one we've had, he denies this happening. Although I don't know why he denies it, because it did happen. The first night at that lake, we'd seen some carp showing. I wanted to fish for him. He didn't, because we didn't know if we were allowed to fish there or whatever. We'd already been moved on from one area because I made him I told him to fish somewhere he didn't want to fish from, because I thought it was a good idea, and he said it wasn't a good idea, and he turns out he was right. So then we've gone to another area he didn't really want to fish from, and I did. I just didn't want to drive all that way and spend our first night sat by the car. And then, yeah, we had a big argument about that. I drove off in the boat. He was shouting at me as I drove off. Can't remember what he was shouting. And I sort of got to a point, I thought, if I drive all the way back to the car now and leave him there, there's every chance that come the morning, this trip isn't going to happen. So I drove back up to Jim. We spoke to each other. We was like, look, we'll just meet each other at the car. Sort of smoothed it out a little bit. And then I drove to the car. He turned up 40 minutes later or whatever. We made friends. But yeah, that was quite bad, and could have ended up a lot worse. But most of the time, no. You don't like being woken up in the night. That's about it, really. But no, yeah, one bad argument that nearly ruined this. Well, this probably wouldn't be happening if that argument hadn't been sorted out, because these 3 films come off the back of it. So yeah, one bad one. And that's the last question, right? So, okay, so last clip. Do you want to play that one, Mike? And then we'll just show in the part 3 trailer. So, play this one.
All right, lover.
All right, proper carnage.
Proper carnage.
It's 4 now, isn't it?
I don't know, yeah, we've got 4 at the
Are we ever going to
yeah.
flip and get them sausages? May have sausages. Are you ever going to get them on?
Oh yeah, you waiting for me to do them? I was waiting for you to do them.
All right.
Remember, you're the chef, I'm the cameraman.
Yeah, right, okay.
Otherwise, I've got to be the chef,
I feel like I'm
the
carrying now.
cameraman, and the carp
Every time I
fisherman.
pick it up, it's like do this, do that. It's like you have to try and not take it personally, but it does grind you a bit. Do this,
Sorry,
do that.
mate.
And then he looks at the pictures. Oh no, mate. I go, oh, come here, come closer. Zoom in, zoom out. We ought to do an outtake of this. It'd be flipping.
You're
epic.
one big outtake, mate.
Oi.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's quite a fitting clip actually, based on the question you just asked. But obviously 9 times out of 10 I'm filming Jim, whereas on this trip he was having to film me as well. And there's filming and then there's filming, and all I was really trying to do was just teach Jim how to become a professional cameraman. But as you can see there, it didn't go down too well, but he does do a pretty good job with the camera. I'm quite lucky as well about that, because I think the third and final film, there's quite a lot of Jim's footage in it. So if anyone watches them, try and take note of the stuff that Jim took, and if you ever meet him on the bank, tell him well done, because I'm sure he'd really appreciate it. We'll sign off now, because it's getting on and I've still got work to do today. But tune into tonight's film. Of course, if you're a Cypography member, do not miss this film. And if you're not a member, you know, certainly consider becoming one, because we've got loads of films. We know you'll love them, and we'll finish with the trailer for tonight's film. So this is the trailer for the third of these 3 films in this little mini series.
Big common. Is that big? Is that big? It looks it. Is it big?
Don't know. It's not a pasty.
It's got to be the other one, isn't it? Right, we've got a bit of double carnage going on here. I've just had a double take. Now Jim's had a double take.
One last look before I return back to this massive, massive inland sea.
If you're watching this film and you're thinking, oh, all they're doing is hauling, you can't write this stuff. You know, the lake we're at, this ain't meant to happen here.
Yeah.
I can feel the weight then.
Look at it. This is a joke. Just doing pictures of Jim's fish. Right, I've got to go.
This is the biggest carp I have ever caught outside of the UK, and from by far the biggest lake I have ever caught. Yeah? Right, so there we go. That's the final trailer. I hope you've enjoyed our first live. We're going to call this a live stream, aren't we? I hope you enjoyed our first live stream. We will keep doing these, because like I say, it's quite a nice way to talk to people. And yeah, it's been good fun. So hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any...
If there's an app.
Is there an app? What?
There is an app.
Yes, there is a Cypography app, yes. So yeah, if you've enjoyed it, keep your eyes peeled. We'll try and do these as regularly as we can, maybe once a week or so. If you've got any ideas how we could improve them, we'll do the little giveaways like we have done. So all the pop-ups and that, we'll do a different giveaway with every film. And yeah, that's about it really. See you next time. Hope you enjoy the films if you watch them. And like I say, comment section, if you've got any ideas how we can make these better, things you'd like to see, maybe not like to see, just let us know. And that's it from me. Goodbye.
And mate, bye.
And Gemma, say bye.